She didn't even flinch when the judge read the charges. That's what one courtroom witness whispered, hands trembling, as Tracy Reiner sat frozen, expression unreadable, back rigid, eyes locked forward. 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her name wasn't on the indictment. Not yet. But after what her brother Nick said on the stand, the air in the courtroom turned electric. You could practically hear the reporters' pens scratching in unison. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because for the first time in this headline-drenched Hollywood tragedy, the spotlight shifted, and it pointed directly at her. But let's rewind. Because what happened at 3:13 a.m. on that blood-soaked Sunday didn't begin with violence. It began with silence. No alarms. No shouts. Just a dark Brentwood mansion hiding something horrific inside. And a guest house barely 30 yards away, where Nick Reiner claimed he was asleep. But when police arrived, alerted by his 911 call, they found not only a crime scene fit for a horror film, but a family splintered by secrets, rivalries, and something far more disturbing. A trail of evidence that didn't make sense. And the more investigators looked, the less they believed the official story. Let me ask you, if your parents were just murdered, stabbed in their own home, would your first instinct be to blame your sister? Because that's exactly what Nick Reiner did. And here's where the Real story begins. Hollywood royalty, or just a broken home? Rob Reiner wasn't just another director. He was Rob Reiner. From The Princess Bride to A Few Good Men, he helped define American film. His wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, was no less accomplished, a philanthropist, a producer, a force in her own right. Their $13.5 million Brentwood estate was more than a home. It was a monument to Hollywood success. But behind those gates, things weren't golden. Tracy Reiner, Rob's adopted daughter, biologically Penny Marshall's child, had always been part of the family, but never fully in the family, some claimed. Rumors of tension, jealousy, and emotional outbursts had long surrounded her relationship with Rob and Michelle. And Nick? Rob's biological son. The golden child who spiraled into addiction, rehab, estrangement, and, now, headlines. Their youngest, Romy, just 27, seemed like the only one untouched by scandal, until she became the first one to walk in on her parents' corpses. Let that sink in. Your sister finds your murdered parents and tells police. There's someone dangerous in this family, and it's not who you think. So when Tracy Reiner sat in that courtroom, holding back tears as Nick Reiner took the stand, the room wasn't breathing. Because what he said next wasn't just shocking, it rewrote the story. The 911 call that opened Pandora's box. Here's what we know. At 3:31 a.m., LAPD received a call from Nick Reiner, claiming he found his parents dead inside the main house. His voice was panicked, high-pitched, repeatedly saying, "Oh my God," and they're not moving. But here's the first twist. When police pulled security footage from the guest house exterior, they discovered something disturbing. Nick didn't enter the main house until after he made the call. So how did he know they were dead? He later claimed he heard a noise, suspected something, and just knew. But detectives weren't buying it, and neither was the court. And yet, just when prosecutors thought they had their suspect, Romy stepped forward. She told police something was missing. No, not a murder weapon. A person. She always said she'd get revenge, Romy's whisper. According to court records, Romy told officers, "You're looking at the wrong sibling." She didn't offer much more at the time, but what she did say changed everything. She said Tracy had been angry, furious over a recent change in Rob's, that reduced her inheritance significantly. Furious that Michelle, her stepmother, had allegedly blocked her from producing credits on 2 recent family projects. And, most importantly, furious that she'd been left out of a last-minute family gathering just days before the murder. She told me she felt erased, Romy reportedly said. She kept saying, "They made me nothing. I'll show them what nothing looks like." Sound like motive? It gets worse. Tracy had disappeared for nearly 3 hours the night of the murder. Her phone was off. Her car was parked 3 blocks from the estate. And, brace yourself, when forensics dusted the door handle to the master bedroom where Rob and Michelle were found, guess whose partial print showed up? Not Nick's. Not Romy's. Tracy's. But she's not charged, yet. That's the kicker. As of now, only Nick Reiner faces charges. 2 counts. first-degree murder. And he's pled not guilty. But from the moment he opened his mouth in court, it was clear his defense was something entirely unexpected. He didn't just claim he didn't do it. He claimed he knew who did. And he said her name, Tracy Reiner. You could hear the gasp. Even the judge looked stunned. Defense attorneys objected. Prosecutors scrambled. And Tracy? She didn't even blink. But her hands? They started to shake. What the media missed, a family imploding for years. Look, it's easy to paint this as a simple case of parricide. Estranged son, murky past, family fortune, classic Hollywood true crime setup. But that's lazy. Because when you really look under the surface, this family wasn't just divided. They were at war behind closed doors. In 2023, emails between Tracy and Rob surfaced during a studio dispute. Her words, "You've made me an orphan twice. Once when you married Michelle. And again when you shut me out." Nick had reportedly begged his parents to cut ties with Tracy after an explosive Thanksgiving fight 2 years ago, where glass was shattered and police were called. And Michelle? She had reportedly confided in a close friend weeks before her death, saying, "I'm afraid someone's going to snap. And I don't think it'll be Nick." So who really had a motive? Let's ask the real question. If you were about to be cut from a $75 million estate, wouldn't you feel like your world was collapsing? Especially if you believed you'd already been cast aside? Court documents reveal Rob and Michelle updated their will 10 days before their deaths. The updated version dramatically reduced Tracy's share and named Romy as the new majority beneficiary, citing trust issues. They never got the chance to explain what those trust issues were. Now ask yourself, what's more believable? That a recovering addict's son randomly snapped and killed both parents in one night? Or that a daughter, long bitter, long ignored, with motive, prints, and a timeline hole, did the unthinkable? The public turns, and the courtroom follows. The media started by demonizing Nick. Easy target, past trouble, suspicious behavior, the first on the scene. But once Tracy's name entered the fray, something shifted. Photos of her walking into court, sunglasses, head down, no comment, spread like wildfire. Comment sections exploded with theories. True crime podcasts began digging. One even unearthed a 2017 video where Tracy drunkenly joked, "You'd be surprised what people are capable of when they're angry enough." And then came the bombshell. LAPD found a hidden safe in her garage. What was inside? We'll get to that. But it changed the case. And it changed public opinion. Because this wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a full-blown psychological war. Why now? Why this story? Maybe you're wondering, why are we talking about this today? Because justice doesn't just hinge on DNA and fingerprints. It hinges on truth. And truth, in this case, is slippery, warped by grief, muted by fame, drenched in years of resentment. But it's rising, bit by bit, with every court hearing, every leaked testimony, every silent glance between Tracy and Nick. Hollywood has seen scandals, but it's never seen one like this. Because behind the glitter, this family hid something rotten. And when the mask slipped, it revealed a monster none of us expected. So far, we've only scratched the surface. You've heard the 911 call. You've seen the finger pointing. You've felt the tension. But what the LAPD found next, in Tracy's personal safe, would send a chill through the entire courtroom. And it was only the beginning. What happens when a hidden safe speaks louder than a confession? Because what the detectives uncovered inside that matte gray lockbox wasn't just a collection of personal keepsakes. It was a roadmap, a timeline, a silent scream buried beneath years of resentment. And the moment they pried it open, just hours after Tracy broke down in court, the murder investigation spiraled into something darker. It began with a simple receipt, but it ended with a whisper from the grave. 3:13 a.m., a night Brentwood will never forget. Let's rewind to the moment everything changed. It was early Sunday morning, the kind of still, eerie silence only Los Angeles knows before sunrise. No helicopters, no paparazzi, just crickets, wind, and the faint hum of security lights blinking through the dark. Inside the $13.5 million Reiner estate, all was quiet. Until it wasn't. At precisely 3:13 a.m., a motion sensor tripped just outside the main foyer of the house. 30 seconds later, another near the staircase. Then silence again. No alarm. No distress call. No panic. Only a flicker of movement captured on a hidden indoor camera, later retrieved from an old server box in the media room by police. The footage showed a figure, just a blur at first, but when LAPD enhanced it, the shape, the posture, it wasn't Nick Reiner. And it wasn't Romy either. It looked feminine, shorter, deliberate, wearing gloves, and carrying something in her right hand. 3:31 a.m., Nick's call. Roughly 18 minutes later, Nick Reiner called 911 from his iPhone. The transcript reads like a frantic mess of incomplete thoughts. Oh my God. My parents. They're just lying there. I think they're gone. The dispatcher tried to pin him down. But here's where the contradiction begins. Nick said he had just walked in and found the bodies. But the house's smart lock system, which logs every door opening, shows the main entrance was opened for the first time at 3:30 a.m. So how did Nick know what was inside before he even entered? Did he lie? Or was someone else in the house before him? The cops arrive, and nothing adds up. At 3:43 a.m., two black and white cruisers from LAPD rolled up to the Brentwood gate. Nick met them barefoot. He was wearing a hoodie, hands shaking, tears streaming. But his story kept shifting. First he said he heard a scream. Then he said he had a gut feeling something was wrong. Then he admitted he hadn't spoken to his parents since dinner the day before. All of it off. But even then, officers weren't prepared for what they were about to see. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, were found upstairs in the master suite, stabbed multiple times, each wound precise, deliberate. No signs of a break-in. No struggle. Their expressions eerily peaceful, almost trusting. Michelle still wore her wedding ring. A tablet sat on the nightstand, its screen cracked. An unfinished message glowed. "You can't threaten us like this again. We'll have to tell her." That was it. It ended mid-sentence. Romy's arrival, and her chilling observation. At 4:07 a.m., their daughter Romy arrived at the estate. She hadn't been called by police. She showed up on her own. Why? Because she had received a text from her mother at 2:54 a.m., a message Romy would later call strange. The text simply read, "If anything happens, remember, you know her better than anyone." No name, no context, just that. When she saw the chaos, the ambulances, the crime scene tape, Romy fell to her knees. But when an officer tried to console her, she reportedly whispered something that sent chills down his spine. It wasn't Nick. She refused to say more right then. But later, in the station, she gave them a name. Tracy's timeline, the vanishing window. So where was Tracy Reiner during all of this? That's the question investigators started asking within hours. Tracy claimed she had been at her home in Topanga Canyon, asleep. No one saw her leave. No one saw her arrive. But cell tower data told a different story. Between 2:11 a.m. and 3:29 a.m., her phone pinged near Barrington and Sunset, just 2 blocks from the Brentwood estate. Then it went dark, shut off, or disabled. Surveillance from a nearby gas station later revealed what looked like her car, a black Audi SUV, turning down a side street that led toward the Reiner compound. No plates visible. No driver face seen. But the timestamp? 3:05 a.m. 8 minutes before the motion sensors went off inside Rob and Michelle's home. The safe that changed everything. Let's go back to that safe. 2 days after the murders, LAPD executed a search warrant on Tracy's Topanga residence. Tucked behind shelves in her garage, behind old film reels and boxes labeled archives, they found a metal floor safe. Inside, a bloodstained hoodie. An old letter from Rob, dated 3 months earlier, accusing Tracy of erratic behavior and borderline threats. And most damning, a printed map of the Brentwood estate. Not just any map. This one had handwritten notes. Red circles. Arrows pointing to blind spots. A penciled X over the side gate. And a note next to the bedroom window that simply read, "Quick. Quiet. Don't wake her." Who was her? Romy? Michelle? A pet? Or was it meant for someone else entirely? No fingerprints on the paper. But the handwriting? Romy later confirmed, that's definitely Tracy's. Whispers from the staff, she knew the system. Here's something the public didn't know until now. The Reiners had long used a private home security company, Unalived, known for installing custom smart systems for celebrity clients. Guess who helped oversee the original install? Tracy. Back in 2019, while producing a short documentary at the house, She reportedly coordinated with the tech team and requested access codes for logistics. Whether or not those codes ever expired, still under investigation. But one former staff member, an ex-nanny named Linda, told detectives something unnerving. Tracy once joked that she could walk in and out of that house in the middle of the night, and no one would ever know. At the time, it sounded like sarcasm. Now, not so funny. So what really happened that night? Let's try to piece it together based on everything we know. 2:54 a.m. Michelle sends Romy the cryptic warning. 3:05 a.m. Tracy's car is seen near the Brentwood estate. 3:13 a.m. Motion sensors trip inside the house. 3:29 a.m. Nick's phone pings as he leaves the guest house. 3:30 a.m. He opens the front door for the first time. 3:31 a.m. He calls 911. Too neat? Or too perfect? What if, just what if, Nick really didn't do it? What if he was being set up? Or worse, what if he saw something that night he hasn't told police? And here's where it gets even darker. Because there's one more thing they found in Tracy's safe. A folded photo of her, Rob, and Michelle from 1992. Smiling. Happy. But across Michelle's face, a deep ink line. And beneath it, scribbled in red pen. She took everything. That was the night the Reiners died. But it wasn't the last time Tracy would enter the courtroom. Because when the prosecution confronted her with what was found in the safe, she did something no one expected. She looked the DA in the eye and smiled. What kind of person smiles at the moment they're confronted with damning evidence? Not denial, not panic, not tears. A smile. It wasn't loud. It wasn't gloating. But it was unmistakably there. And that single, controlled expression would become the obsession of every headline the next morning. The smile that shook the courtroom, one tabloid screamed. But the question no one could answer was, why did she smile? To understand that, you have to understand Tracy Reiner. And how her relationship with the Reiner family was never as picture-perfect as Hollywood made it seem. The public narrative versus the private one. On paper, Tracy Reiner was Hollywood royalty. The daughter of legendary director Penny Marshall, adopted by Rob Reiner after he married Penny in 1971. The Reiners raised her, publicly loved her, gave her access to the best education, opportunities, and connections. But privately, things weren't so simple. Those close to the family whispered of something colder, something strained between Rob and Tracy, a dynamic that was more business than blood. And despite the public appearances, there was tension always brewing beneath the surface. Tracy wasn't Rob's biological daughter. That detail, while rarely spoken about in press interviews, mattered, especially to her. And the older she got, the more that unspoken distinction began to burn. The battle for identity. Imagine growing up in a house full of fame. A father who created cultural classics. A mother whose name alone could open doors in Hollywood. And yet, you feel like the extra. Not the star. Not even the co-star. Just a footnote. That was the shadow Tracy lived in. In one of the court-submitted journals found during the investigation, she had written, "They made me feel like a guest in my own story. I'm a placeholder. A symbol. Not their daughter. Not really." Painful words. But they paint a clear picture. This wasn't just jealousy. It was identity erosion. And when Rob remarried Michelle Singer, a woman known for her elegance, control, and behind-the-scenes influence, Tracy reportedly felt her place in the family completely disappear. The stepmother strain. Michelle Reiner was many things. Brilliant, respected, generous, but warm? Not always. Several friends of the family claim Michelle never really clicked with Tracy. She called her difficult, said she had a chip on her shoulder. And over the years, that wedge only grew deeper. When Rob and Michelle launched a foundation in 2004, Tracy was allegedly excluded from any leadership role. She wasn't consulted. She wasn't listed in promotional material. She was invisible. And that hurt. In a 2010 email leak, now court evidence, Tracy wrote to a confidant, "They use me when it's convenient. Then I'm told to sit down and smile like I'm lucky to be included. But I see the way Michelle looks at me, like I'm the stain she has to live with." That's not just family tension. That's boiling resentment. And it was festering. The inheritance twist no one expected. Let's talk about money. Because this case, like most Hollywood tragedies, eventually comes down to who gets what. Rob Reiner had amassed an estimated net worth of $75 million by the time of his death. Films, properties, production companies, investments, it was all on the table. And Tracy was originally part of the will. Until she wasn't. Court records confirm that in early 2024, just months before the murders, Rob and Michelle made significant changes to their estate plan. Tracy's share? Removed. Romy Reiner was given expanded control as successor trustee. Nick Reiner, despite his rocky past, remained a partial beneficiary, albeit with conditions. But Tracy? Zero. No explanation provided in the document. Just a full exclusion. When asked in court how she reacted, Tracy said, "I cried. Then I laughed. Then I got over it." But did she? Because days later, she sent Romy an email that prosecutors read aloud in court. "Don't think you've won anything. You're just the next puppet. When he's gone, we'll see how long you last." Unhinged or unheard. Here's where the contradictions begin. Friends described Tracy as passionate, eccentric, misunderstood. But others? They saw warning signs. An ex-boyfriend, who asked to remain anonymous, told reporters she was obsessed with validation. She needed to feel important, needed the world to revolve around her. At dinner parties, she'd often bring up past slights, conversations with Michelle that went wrong, holidays where she was excluded. She replayed them like broken records. And in one disturbing incident, revealed for the first time in court, she allegedly mailed Michelle a photo collage with one corner burned and a note that read, "Funny how things fade. Weird? Definitely. Threatening?" Prosecutors say yes. But Tracy's defense team argued it was artistic expression. So which is it? A misunderstood woman lashing out in pain? Or a dangerous one masking resentment behind creativity? A history of mental health concerns. According to leaked medical records, Tracy had been seeing a therapist off and on for more than 2 decades. Nothing unusual there. But in 2022, a psychiatric evaluation reportedly flagged her for borderline personality tendencies with escalated emotional response under perceived rejection. Translation? She didn't take betrayal well. At all. And when Rob and Michelle iced her out, when they allegedly took away her seat at the family table, when they rewrote the will, she may have interpreted it not just as loss, but as war. And Tracy never walked away from a war. The diary entry that sent shivers through the courtroom. Remember that safe? Among the receipts, maps, and photographs, police discovered a small red diary. Leather-bound. Pages worn from years of entries. On March 8th, just a week before the murders, she wrote, "They don't deserve peace. She walks around like she owns him. But I'm the one who knows the truth. The bloodline lies. If it ends in fire, so be it." Who's she? Michelle? Who's him? Rob? What does she mean by ends in fire? The prosecution says that line was metaphorical. The defense says it was fiction writing. But let's ask the question no one in court dared to say out loud. Was Tracy planning something for years, and did it finally snap into motion? So, why the smile? That brings us back to the moment Tracy was confronted in court, with the evidence from her own safe, the diary, the photo, the map, and she smiled. Why? Here are the theories floating around. Power play. The smile was her way of saying, "You're too late." She was always a few steps ahead. Nervous reaction, a psychological tick under pressure, confused defense mechanism. Mockery. She doesn't take the court seriously and believes she'll walk away untouched. Revenge satisfaction, a final, knowing grin that said, "I told them not to erase me." But the truth? Only Tracy knows. And she's not talking. Not yet. But just when the courtroom thought they had seen it all, just when Tracy's smirk became the story, Romy Reiner made a shocking request. She asked to testify against her sister. And what she revealed would make that smile vanish. What if the only person who can save you is the one the world thinks is guilty? Nick Reiner wasn't supposed to be the one telling the truth. From the moment the news broke, Rob and Michelle Reiner stabbed to death in their Brentwood mansion. The media pointed at the obvious suspect, the black sheep, the addict's son, the one who lived in the guest house. It was a tidy narrative, one the public understood. But as the courtroom unraveled the story, it became painfully clear. Nick wasn't hiding a secret. He was buried beneath one. And his sudden decision to point fingers at his sister wasn't just shocking. It may have been his final act of defiance in a family that never really protected him. The Reiner son the public didn't know. Most people only know Nick Reiner from the headlines. The son of a Hollywood legend who spiraled into substance abuse, rehab stints, and legal issues in his 20s. What they don't know is that Nick was a gifted writer. He co-wrote the semi-autobiographical film Being Charlie with Rob, based loosely on his battles with addiction. The film was personal, raw, and more importantly, it exposed the complicated, bruised bond between father and son. But even after the film, things didn't heal. In interviews, Nick was honest. My relationship with my parents was strained, loving, but never normal. And privately, it was worse. Multiple emails presented in court painted a picture of a man who felt disposable. Rob allegedly told a family friend, "I love Nick, but I can't trust him. Not after what he did last time." We still don't know what last time was. But what we do know is that Nick was in rehab just months before the murders. Clean, sober, attending meetings, trying, desperately, to rebuild. And living on the estate was supposed to be his second chance. Instead, it became a crime scene. The guest house of shadows. Nick's living quarters were just 40 feet from the main house. A small, elegant guest house. One bedroom. Private entrance. Cameras installed after a 2021 break-in scare. And on the night of the murder, every motion sensor was silent. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. But Nick was wide awake. Court documents reveal his phone usage between 2:55 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. showed multiple web searches. How to know if someone is dead without touching them. Brentwood Police Non-Emergency. Estate law California son versus adopted daughter. Disturbing? Yes. Incriminating? Maybe. But context matters. His lawyer claimed the searches were made after he heard noises, felt something was wrong, and panicked. The death search? A symptom of trauma, not guilt. What do you think? Would you Google that? Nick's testimony. The moment everything changed. When Nick took the stand, it wasn't smooth. He fidgeted, avoided eye contact, voice shaking. For the first time since his arrest, he addressed the courtroom directly. And what he said, nobody expected it. "I didn't kill my parents, but I know who did." Gasps. Audible shock. Prosecutors scrambled to object. The judge paused everything. But Nick pressed on. "It was Tracy. I know it. And if you want proof, ask Romy." That moment flipped the narrative. Because for months, Nick had said nothing. He'd been advised to stay silent, let his legal team work behind the scenes. But something snapped. Or maybe something clicked. He was tired of protecting the family. Tired of being the Reiner scapegoat. The letter he never sent. Another discovery from the guest house that changed the tone of the trial. A handwritten letter addressed to Rob Reiner. Dated 3 weeks before the murders. Never sent. It read, "Dad, I know you think I'm the problem. Maybe I am. But you never saw what she's been doing. I'm scared. Not of you. Not of Mom. Of Tracy. She's not who you think." It was tucked into a copy of Misery, one of Rob's most iconic films. Ironic. The judge allowed it into evidence. The defense called it a cry for help. The prosecution said it was manipulation. But what do you think? Was this a warning? Or a carefully planted seed? The bathroom window theory. Here's where things get strange. During the investigation, detectives found something odd in the guest house bathroom. A smudge on the outer window pane. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. Forensics revealed it was a partial palm print. Not Nick's. Not Romy's. It belonged to Tracy. Now ask yourself, what was her hand doing on the outside of Nick's bathroom window? Theories flew. Some said she was trying to frame him, plant evidence. Others suggested she was checking if he was home before going into the main house. And one theory, that Nick saw her through that window. And that's why he never went inside the house until after she was gone. He was afraid. Afraid of her. Romy's revelation, sister against sister. Which brings us to Romy. Her decision to testify came out of nowhere. Until then, she had refused media appearances. No interviews. No statements. A total media blackout. But after Nick's testimony, she asked the DA if she could speak. And what she said on the stand broke Tracy's composure for the first time. She came to my apartment the week before. Said they were cutting her out. Said they were making her a ghost. I thought she was venting. But then she said, "Sometimes ghosts have to haunt." Romy's voice cracked. She looked directly at Tracy. "You said they wouldn't listen. That they'd pay. You scared me. But I never thought. I didn't think you'd actually. The courtroom fell silent. Tracy, pale and stiff, clenched her fists, but said nothing. Her smile was gone. The hidden call log. Phone records revealed another crucial detail. A 17-second call between Nick and Tracy at 2:17 a.m. on the night of the murder. Neither party ever mentioned it. Tracy claimed it must have been a pocket dial. Nick said he didn't remember. But audio experts testified that something was said, though the words were too muffled to confirm. Why wouldn't they admit to speaking? What could have been said in just 17 seconds that was so damaging? Neither of them wanted it on record. Theories abound. But the DA believes it was a final warning. Or possibly a threat. Is Nick guilty of anything? Let's be honest. Nick isn't a saint. His past is troubled. His relationships fractured. And his place in the family? Complicated at best. But is he capable of murder? That's the question jurors now face. Did he kill his parents in cold blood? Or was he in the wrong place, at the wrong time, when a far more calculated plan was unfolding? And if he didn't do it, why hasn't he said more? Why not name names earlier? Why wait until he was already painted as the villain? Unless he was protecting someone. And now, he's done protecting. But just when it seemed like the tide was turning in Nick's favor, a sealed envelope arrived at the courthouse. No return address. No fingerprints. Inside, a USB drive. And when the DA played the contents, everyone in the courtroom froze. Because the voice on that recording was Michelle Reiner. And she was terrified. When the dead speak, who listens? The courtroom was packed. Cameras weren't allowed. But the silence when that audio clip played was more deafening than any press conference. Michelle Reiner's voice, shaky, barely above a whisper, cut through the tension like a scalpel. If anything happens, it won't be Nick. It'll be her. You know who I mean. You could hear her breath quicken. The soft, trembling inhale before she continued. She's not well. She scares me. Please, keep this between us. The timestamp? 2 days before the murder. And now, everyone wanted to know, who was Michelle talking to? The answer? Her daughter, Romy. Romy's private pain goes public. Romy Reiner had been the quiet one. The one who kept to herself. The one whose only public trace, prior to the murders, was a handful of indie film credits and artsy Instagram posts. But in court, she became the wild card. She wasn't supposed to testify. Not officially, but after hearing Nick's accusations. And after that smile from Tracy, she stepped forward and dropped a bombshell. I warned them. I told them to check Tracy's room. There were things in there. Dangerous things. The courtroom leaned in. After I found them, I stopped going to the house. The journal with the red binding. It started with a journal. 6 months before the murders, Romy had been visiting the family estate for a casual Sunday dinner. While waiting upstairs for her mother, she wandered into Tracy's guest suite. What she found chilled her to her core. A red leather-bound journal on the desk, open to a page marked with a black feather. Curiosity got the better of her. And what she read, I watched them sleep. They trust me. They don't lock the doors anymore. Soon, they'll learn. Romy thought it was a script, a writing exercise, something fictional, until she flipped to another entry. The knife has a name. I call her Silencer. She'll be my voice when words fail. That entry had the date written on the bottom, just days before Rob and Michelle's wedding anniversary. Why didn't she tell anyone then? The defense team pounced. If Romy saw something so alarming, why didn't she go to police before the murders? Why didn't she sound the alarm? Romy, eyes filled with tears, answered simply. Because I didn't want to believe she meant it. She described her childhood with Tracy as chaotic but loving. A big sister who could make her laugh one moment and scare her senseless the next. She was two people. The one who brought me ice cream when I was heartbroken, and the one who smashed a mirror when Dad asked her to leave Thanksgiving early. She's going to do it. The text no one noticed. Romy's friend, Maya, also took the stand. She had received a text the night before the murders that read, "She's not right. Something's coming. She's going to do it." Maya never asked who she was. At the time, she thought Romy was being dramatic about a fight with her mom. But now, that message has become one of the trial's most chilling early warnings. Because it came before the 911 call, before the bodies were found, before anyone outside that family knew a storm was coming. Romy's 911 call, what she didn't say, and what she whispered. Although Nick made the initial 911 call at 3:31 a.m., Romy made her own call at 4:12 a.m. after arriving at the estate and seeing the flashing lights. She asked if her parents were okay. When the dispatcher confirmed they were deceased, Romy's voice broke. But then, as the call was about to end, she said something under her breath. For months, no one had noticed, until a tech team cleaning up archived audio enhanced the final 4 seconds. You hear the call ending, then a muffled voice, and then, clear as day, check Tracy's room. She wasn't speaking to the dispatcher. She was speaking to herself. And now, that whisper became a scream. So, what was in Tracy's room? That prompted detectives to revisit the crime scene, this time with a search warrant focused specifically on Tracy's private quarters in the Reiner estate. They found a velvet box containing 4 knives. One was missing, a photograph of Michelle with her eyes scribbled out, and under a loose floorboard, an unlabeled thumb drive. On that drive, recordings, phone calls, arguments, voicemails Tracy had secretly recorded over the years. Some of them deeply personal, others deeply disturbing. In one, from January 2025, you hear Rob's voice. "You need help, Tracy. You're scaring Romy." Tracy's response: "She should be scared. So should you." The voicemail that changes everything. And then came the biggest blow yet. A voicemail, deleted from Michelle's phone but recovered from her cloud backup, left by Tracy 2 nights before the murder. "You made your choice. Don't say I didn't warn you. I won't be erased." Prosecutors claim it was a threat. The defense says it was emotional venting. But the jury? They looked rattled. Because when you line up the journal entries, the voicemails, the whisper from Romy, a picture begins to emerge. One with a knife in the shadows, and a sister holding it. A warning ignored. Romy had begged her mother to take a break, go to a hotel, bring security into the house. Michelle reportedly brushed her off. "She wouldn't really hurt us, sweetie. She's just acting out." But she was wrong. Because by then, it was already too late. Romy's final words on the stand. Before stepping down, Romy turned to the jury and said, "I love my sister. I always have. But the person she became, that's not someone I recognize." She looked across the room at Tracy. "I wish I'd said something sooner. Maybe they'd still be alive." Tracy? She didn't cry. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Just sat there, stone-faced, as her little sister walked away. But just when the courtroom thought Romy had given all she had, she pulled something out of her pocket, a photo, and said, "This is what was in her hand the night I found them." The judge called for a recess before the image could be shown. But reporters in the gallery swore they saw one word scrawled in red ink across the back of the picture. One word, one name, Romy. What kind of person leaves behind a map, a knife, and recordings of the very people they claim to love? Tracy Reiner may not have spoken a word in court yet, but her safe? It told everything. Hidden in plain sight, beneath the clutter of outdated film reels and award show memorabilia, buried behind a dusty wall of boxes labeled archives, Tracy's metal floor safe wasn't just a container. It was a vault of fury, of planning, of proof. And when detectives opened it, they didn't just find evidence, they found intent. This wasn't a moment of rage. This was premeditated. Uncovering the safe. It was 2 weeks into the investigation when LAPD obtained a secondary search warrant for Tracy's Topanga Canyon residence. They weren't expecting much, maybe clothes, maybe receipts. But tucked into the rear of the garage, behind a faux wooden wall panel, was a recessed floor safe. Unmarked, unassuming. They pried it open. Inside, a crumpled photo of Michelle Reiner, face X'd out in red ink. A velvet pouch labeled silencer. Dozens of printed emails and letters. And a thumb drive. No label. No cover. No explanation. But the contents of that thumb drive would end up being the most damning piece of evidence in the entire case. The letters, screams in ink. The printed pages were eerily organized, each in a plastic sleeve, categorized by name, date, subject. Tracy had kept everything, correspondence from Rob, Michelle, even Romy. All the fights, the rejections, the accusations. But these weren't just receipts. They were manifestos. In one unsent letter to Rob, dated just 5 days before his death, she wrote, "You chose them. Again. Always them. You made me watch as you erased me, bit by bit, like I was a stain on your resume. You'll learn I was the only one who ever told you the truth." Another, even darker. She walks like she owns you. Like I'm supposed to bow. But what happens when the pawn learns how to checkmate the queen? The queen, obviously, being Michelle. And checkmate. Well, we know what came next. The knife with a name. Among the items found in the safe was a velvet pouch. Inside it, a serrated blade, 5 inches, lightweight, custom grip. No fingerprints, but a strange marking on the handle. S. Later, police found a corresponding journal entry. Silencer is perfect. Easy to clean. Quick to use. No mess. Just the point. That's where the pouch got its name. It wasn't a kitchen knife. It wasn't decorative. It was designed. As if Tracy wasn't just thinking about revenge. She was engineering it. The voice tapes, a family on the brink. Now the thumb drive. Dozens of audio files. Each labeled by date. Some just minutes long. Others over an hour. Detectives started with the earliest entries. One from 2018 had Tracy recording an argument with Michelle in the kitchen. Michelle, you're not the victim, Tracy. You just make everyone miserable. Tracy. Maybe because misery is the only language you people understand. Another, from 2020, featured Rob. Rob. You need help. Not a role in a film. Not more attention. Just help. Tracy. I needed a father. Not a director. But the worst one was a voicemail Rob left on her birthday, less than 2 weeks before his murder. I can't do this anymore. Your rage, your bitterness, it's too much. We've rewritten the will. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Click. Silence. No response from Tracy. But 2 days later, she left her own voicemail. It wasn't a reply. It was a declaration. You made your bed, old man. Let's see how well you sleep in it. A diary of intent. In addition to the voice recordings and letters, detectives found a notebook labeled simply, Arch. At first glance, it seemed like another journal. But it wasn't. It was a planner. A checklist. Each page listed dates, times, locations, and beneath each heading, instructions. Disable outdoor motion sensor, left gate. Route exit through service drive, no cameras. Avoid contact with R. She's too observant. Trigger Nick if needed. Use voicemail bait. Wait, trigger Nick? That line raised eyebrows. Was Tracy planning to frame her brother? Or manipulate him into doing something he didn't understand? Prosecutors didn't want to speculate. But defense lawyers were rattled. Because if she was strategizing how to use Nick's reputation as a cover, that's not just sinister. That's criminal genius. Psychological profile. Not impulsive, but calculated. The FBI brought in a profiler. Her conclusion? This is someone who felt invisible. And invisibility breeds resentment. She didn't want just revenge, she wanted control. She wanted to orchestrate a downfall that made everyone realize what they lost when they pushed her away. Let that sink in. This wasn't a lashing out. This was a symphony of destruction. And everyone in the courtroom finally began to understand why Romy had whispered, check Tracy's room. The last entry. Make it loud enough to echo. The final page of the Arch notebook had one sentence. Written in all caps. Underlined. Make it loud enough to echo. Was it about the crime? The confession? The aftermath? Maybe all of it. Or maybe it was about finally being heard in a family that had ignored her for decades. How did Tracy get away with it for so long? That's the question everyone kept asking. How could someone this methodical, this angry, this emotionally unstable, live among them without detection? The answer? She didn't. There were signs. Dozens of them. But the family ignored them. Rob thought it was a phase. Michelle thought it was attention-seeking. Nick thought it was harmless bitterness. And Romy? She knew. She just didn't speak up in time. Until it was too late. But even with the voice tapes, the journals, the knife, and the letters, one thing was still missing. The murder weapon. Until the landscaper made a call. He was digging near the east garden wall, clearing space for winter flowers. And his shovel hit something hard, wrapped in burlap. Heavy. When they unwrapped it, a blade. Rusted. Bloodstained. And carved into the handle? A single word. Silencer. What do you do when the murder weapon speaks louder than the witnesses? Because in the Reiner case, a buried blade told a story that no one in the family dared to. Not Nick. Not Romy. And definitely not Tracy. After weeks of speculation, conflicting testimonies, and psychological chess matches inside the courtroom, the discovery of the knife, wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a reckoning. It shattered what was left of the benefit of the doubt. and it turned a whisper of guilt into a scream. The discovery, buried in broad daylight. It was a Thursday morning. Quiet. Ordinary. The Reiner estate's landscaping crew was cleaning up the East Garden. A job postponed for weeks due to the crime scene tape. But now that the main investigation had moved on, the crew resumed their routine. That's when Manuel Diaz, one of the landscapers, hit something. Hard. Metal. Wrapped. Buried just 5 inches below the surface. He thought it was a rusted pipe, until he pulled it up. Wrapped in burlap. Stained. Heavy. And then he saw it. Etched into the wooden handle. Faint but unmistakable. Silencer. He dropped it. Called his supervisor. Within the hour, LAPD was back on the scene. And everything changed. The knife, a forensic goldmine. It was exactly what the prosecution needed. A murder weapon that finally connected the dots. Blood confirmed. Both Rob's and Michelle's DNA were present. Multiple swabs came back with high-volume saturation, indicating close proximity stabbings. But that wasn't all. Lodged in the grip? A partial fingerprint. And on the blade's edge? A strand of hair. The lab techs moved quickly. Within 48 hours, they confirmed. The hair, consistent with Tracy Reiner. The fingerprint, a partial match. Nick Reiner, left thumb. And just like that, confusion returned. How could both siblings' evidence be on the weapon? Theories emerge, 2 sides of a bloody coin. The courtroom exploded with theories. Prosecutors claimed the fingerprint meant Tracy planted the weapon near Nick's quarters before moving it to the garden, touching it with gloves, then grabbing it barehanded to bury it later. But the defense saw an opportunity. They said the print proved Nick handled the knife, meaning he was guilty. Back and forth, day after day. Legal analysts on cable news went wild. But forensic experts on the stand said something crucial. The print was not blood-impressed. It was dry, smudged, older, likely transferred before the killings. In short, Nick may have touched the knife at some earlier point, before it became a weapon. Or, he may have been set up. The video that changed everything. That's when Romy handed over another recording, one she had previously kept private. A surveillance clip from a backup nanny cam in the hallway leading to the main house. It was never connected to the cloud and had been forgotten, until she found the SD card in a storage bin. The timestamp? 3:16 a.m., just minutes after the motion detectors went off. In the footage, a female figure, wearing black, creeps past the hallway. In her hand, something long, metallic. Her face? Obscured, but her gait? Distinctly Tracy's. The court was shown the footage. A side-by-side comparison with earlier videos of Tracy walking confirmed the match. But most chilling? She passes a mirror in the hallway. And for a split second, barely half a second, her face is visible. Cold. Focused. Motive meets method. Here's what investigators now believe happened. Tracy brought the knife, silencer, from her Topanga residence, stored in a velvet pouch found in her safe. She entered the Reiner estate through the side service gate, using her old keycard that hadn't been deactivated. She avoided exterior cameras and slipped inside just after 3:10 a.m., when the system's auto-reset occurred. She moved swiftly, targeting Rob and Michelle in their bedroom first. She then left via the east hallway door, circled the garden, and buried the knife beneath a rosebush. She returned to her car parked down the block by 3:45 a.m. All of this in under 40 minutes. Calculated. Efficient. Cold. So why was Nick's print on the knife? According to Romy, the answer may lie in an incident from years prior. Back in 2022, during one of Tracy's brief reconciliations with the family, she and Nick were reorganizing memorabilia in the garage. Among the items, props from various films, including replica weapons and stunt gear. Romy recalled that Nick once handled a weird knife Tracy had brought with her from a film project. He was joking about how sharp it was. Said it looked like something from Psycho. She smiled, but not in a funny way. Could that have been silencer? Could Tracy have planted a weapon she knew already had Nick's prints? Think about it. She was building a plan, layer by layer. And Nick? He was just another tool. The jury reacts. When the blood evidence was read aloud, the courtroom was silent. Then came the twist. The print wasn't clean enough for conclusive courtroom use. It was suggestive, not definitive. Legally, it was weak. But emotionally, it was damning. For someone. Half the jury looked at Tracy. The other half turned to Nick. And that was the moment the prosecution dropped a line no one forgot. When it comes to blood, you don't need a motive to leave a mess. But to leave no mess at all, that takes planning. The knife, the plan, the setup. Now consider this. Tracy had motive, exclusion, resentment, financial loss. Tracy had means. The knife, the knowledge of the estate's layout. Tracy had opportunity. No alibi during the time of the murders. And now, Tracy had preparation. She planned for cleanup, disposal, and distraction. The distraction? Nick Reiner. His past. His addictions. His location on the estate. He was the perfect fall guy. All she had to do was make him look just guilty enough. Not totally, just believable. Because the real power of the crime wasn't the blade. It was the illusion. But just when the case looked airtight, a new witness came forward. An ex-security tech from the estate. He hadn't worked there in over 2 years. But he claimed he once helped Tracy install something the Reiners didn't know about. A hidden camera, facing Rob and Michelle's bedroom. Still active, still recording. And what it captured, the night of the murders, could unravel everything. What if the motive for a double homicide wasn't hidden in the shadows, but written in plain sight? No blood, no fingerprints, no screaming, just a pen stroke. A single, silent decision that would shatter a family and set the stage for what may have been one of the most coldly calculated revenge plots in Hollywood history. Rob and Michelle Reiner had been updating their will, and just days before they were murdered, they finalized it. What was inside? It explained everything. The will that rewrote the family hierarchy. The Reiners' will wasn't just a legal document. It was a power structure, a blueprint for who mattered and who didn't. And Tracy was no longer in it. Court documents revealed that on March 9, 2025, just 7 days before the murders, Rob and Michelle signed a revised estate plan with their longtime family attorney. The update was swift, sudden, and to some, shocking. Because while their son Nick retained a conditional trust and daughter Romy was appointed successor trustee, Tracy Reiner's name was removed entirely. No explanation attached. No substitution. No small token. Nothing. From $75 million to zero. What triggered the change? So what happened? What led Rob and Michelle to strike Tracy from their will? The courtroom heard testimony from family lawyer Alan Drexler, who had known the couple for over 20 years. He said, they were deeply concerned about Tracy's behavior, emotional volatility, obsessiveness. There were incidents, escalating in frequency, that they believed posed a threat to the family's safety. He then submitted a handwritten note from Rob to Drexler. This isn't about love. We will always love her. But we can't leave our legacy in unstable hands. Another note from Michelle read, she makes threats. Jokes that aren't jokes. I'm afraid this could all end badly. I want Romy protected. And just like that, motive wasn't a mystery anymore. It was handwritten, signed, dated. The breakdown of the revised will. Here's how the revised will divided the estate. Nick Reiner, $10 million in a structured trust, with monthly release amounts and stipulations for sobriety. Romy Reiner, majority beneficiary of all remaining assets, including the Brentwood estate and 60% of their production company's residuals. Foundations and charities. Approximately $12 million directed to various causes supported by Michelle and Rob. Education, arts, homelessness. Tracy Reiner, omitted. No mention, no clause, no inheritance. There was no ambiguity. She wasn't forgotten. She was erased. Tracy's reaction, you'll regret this. And here's where things get dark. According to testimony from Alan Drexler, Tracy found out about the will before the murders. He claims Rob, in a rare moment of transparency, told her on the phone 2 days after the signing. He wanted to explain, to soften the blow. What was Tracy's response? According to Drexler, she went silent. For a moment, I thought the call dropped. Then she said, you'll regret this, old man. She's poisoned you against me, just like I always knew she would. The she being Michelle. And the poison? Not literal. Emotional. The dinner that became the breaking point. For nights before the murder, the Reiners hosted a private family dinner. Nick, Romy, and Tracy were all invited. But things didn't go smoothly. A witness, Romy's boyfriend, Julian, testified. Tracy barely spoke. When she did, it was tense. I heard her say, I built this family just as much as you. Michelle said, You were never excluded. You excluded yourself. That's when Tracy stood up and left. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't take her coat. She just vanished into the night. Julian's final remark? Romy was shaken. She said, I don't like that look in her eyes. It's like she's already written the ending. Legal loopholes and deadly timing. One crucial fact stood out in the trial. The will had been signed and notarized, but the transfer of trust documentation to the bank hadn't yet been processed. Meaning, if Rob and Michelle had died before the transfer finalized, the previous will could technically be contested. Some called it a tragic coincidence. Others, a deadly opportunity. The posthumous power struggle. In the days following the murders, Tracy immediately contacted Drexler's office. She claimed she was entitled to executor status. That alone raised red flags. Because the only way she could have believed that was if she had no idea she had been removed. Or, worse, if she thought she could still manipulate the narrative. When told of her omission, her voice reportedly went flat. I'll contest it. I'll burn it all down before I walk away empty. 3 hours later, she deleted her social media accounts. Romy's secret email. Here's where it gets eerier. 3 days before the murder, Romy sent her parents an email titled, We need to talk about Tracy. It read, I'm not saying she'd do something crazy, but I am saying she's on edge. You've always underestimated how deep her rage goes. Don't give her a reason to explode. That email was flagged in Rob's inbox. Unread. When investigators opened his laptop, it was still there, waiting. Ignored. Was the will the final straw? Let's break it down. Tracy, feeling discarded and betrayed, lashes out emotionally. She's already journaling about knives, silence, and revenge. Her parents strip her from their legacy, legally and emotionally. And days later, they end up dead. Coincidence? Or cause and effect? The courtroom didn't need to be told twice. The motive wasn't just plausible. It was personal. And to Tracy, it wasn't about the money. It was about the message. They didn't just cut her out of the will. They cut her out of the story. And she couldn't let that stand. But the story didn't end with ink and inheritance. Because when the hidden camera footage was finally played in court, it showed something none of the witnesses remembered. A door, left ajar, and a voice, low, whispering, from the hallway, saying one chilling sentence. You'll all sleep forever tonight. And then, the light in the bedroom flicked off. What if the key to solving a double homicide was already inside the house? Unseen, unheard, forgotten, until now. Because the camera that captured one of the most chilling moments of this case, Rob and Michelle's final night alive, wasn't a police body cam. It wasn't a security cam from the front gate. And it definitely wasn't something installed by the Reiners. It was Tracy's. And when that footage played in court, it flipped the entire narrative on its head. The hidden eye in the house. Let's go back. 2 years prior, Tracy Reiner had arranged for renovations on her parents' guest house, a supposed effort to help modernize the space, as she described it. She brought in her own contractor, oversaw the layout changes herself, and, unknown to the rest of the family, installed 3 micro cameras. One facing the guest house main entrance, one inside the shared hallway between the main house and the guest house wing, and one buried behind the molding of the master hallway. Just outside Rob and Michelle's bedroom. No one knew it existed, until a former security tech named Evan Clay came forward. The tech who spilled the secret. Evan Clay had been let go quietly in 2023 after a dispute over pay. But after seeing the media frenzy surrounding the murder trial, he stepped forward with a tip. He told LAPD, Tracy had me install a hidden camera. She said it was for documentary footage. I figured it was for some behind-the-scenes project. I didn't ask questions. When asked why it was placed outside the master bedroom, Clay shrugged. She said it was for family safety. Her words, not mine. He didn't think twice until now. Police secured a warrant. The camera system was still wired to an off-site cloud account, linked to an email under a fake production company name. And the footage was still uploading, even after the murders. The timeline reconstructed in pixels. The footage recovered from the hallway camera is now being called Exhibit Echo. Here's what it showed, timestamped to the minute. 3:13 a.m. Motion near the hallway. A shadow appears, shorter than Nick, slimmer, wearing dark clothes. 3:14 a.m. Figure approaches the master bedroom. Stops. Listens. 3:15 a.m. A gloved hand appears in frame. slowly pushes the bedroom door ajar. 3:16 a.m. The figure leans in. You can't see a face, but you hear a whisper. You'll all sleep forever tonight. 3:17 a.m. The bedroom light flicks off. Footsteps retreat. Silence. 3:30 a.m. Nick enters the hallway from the opposite direction, barefoot, panicked. His face is visible. He walks past the camera. Alone. The courtroom reaction, gasps, and guilt. When the footage was shown in court, no one breathed. The judge paused after the whisper played. Jurors blinked in disbelief. But the most telling reaction was Tracy's. She didn't blink. She didn't protest. She didn't even turn away.